Coming up on the next episode of Zuzu All Grown Up.
It was one of the darkest days in American history. Nearly a quarter of a century has passed. But for those directly impacted by 9/11, the memory of what happened remains fresh. Our guest, Chris Edwards, was one of the first responders, and he is here to tell us about not only the tremendous tragedy of the day, but about the hope from the ashes. How he discovered hope and encountered miracles while saving lives, and the lasting transformational message he has to share with others. Retired New York City firefighter, actor, and author Chris Edwards joins us today.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
You're now listening to Zuzu All Grown Up.
She's been featured in more than 20 films from the early days of film and television.
He is a psychotherapist and her loving husband.
Together, they are on a mission to brighten your day and your life.
It's a time to smile, a time to laugh, a time to expect more.
It's time to get inspired with your hosts, Karolyn Grimes and Dr. Chris Brunell.
It's time to meet Zuzu, all grown up.
Karolyn Grimes has made a lifelong commitment that is based on the profound belief that everyone deserves to experience their own wonderful life. Her husband, Dr. Chris Brunell, has long since joined her on this mission, bringing his own unique passion and insight. Together, their dedication reflects a deep desire to inspire others to embrace the profound truth that life is truly wonderful when we recognize and cherish the love and connections that are all around us. Join Karolyn and Chris to witness how one individual's life can inspire countless others, revealing the transformative power of one person who is determined to do good. As you connect with our inspiring guests, you'll realize that your own journey is also about self-realization, helping others, and earning your wings. Just like today's guest, you too have a unique potential to inspire and elevate those around you. Stay tuned. Another episode of Zuzu All Grown Up is about to begin. Now, here are your hosts. You know her best as Zuzu, Mrs. Karolyn Grimes, and Dr. Chris Brunell. They are joined by today's guest.
We have with us 9/11 first responder, representative of the 9/11 mobile exhibit, and our good friend, Chris Edwards. Hi, Chris. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Karolyn. Hi, Chris. Great seeing you guys again. It's always a pleasure, always a privilege.
Well, I always think about your expression that we love, taking your blinders off. I've never forgotten that.
You saw, immense tragedy during the recovery efforts of the aftermath of 9/11. Yet your message is one of the hope and of faith. We've seen you become a torchbearer of the inspirational message. You seem to be one of the most inspiring people that we've met regarding the aftermath of 9/11. So it's really wonderful to have you here.
And you talk us through a little bit about that?
I got on the job in 1986 on the New York City Fire Department. Had no plans on ever being a New York City firefighter. I always wanted to be a police officer. My father was a police officer. My father was a big-time role model for me, and later on in life, I realized my father's my guardian angel who's with me all the time. There's so many different things that have happened in my lifetime that I really don't think that if I had somebody else, a higher power watching over me, I don't think I would be able to be here speaking to you guys. I would never have had the pleasure of meeting you either, because it was some difficult times. But having a guardian angel like my dad and others, relatives, things that would get through were some of the most difficult times in our life. And September 11 was a day that the old saying that grown men don't cry went right out the window, because some of the biggest, toughest guys I've ever worked with and met, we cried on one another's shoulders, not even realizing what we were going to be getting into when we made it down to the towers itself. Basically, this is up in the firehouse up in the Bronx, an 81 engine, 81 and 46, which is up on Bailey Avenue. I'm not even realizing at the time the magnitude of the attack and the devastation. And if you really didn't get a chance to get down there right away, you really didn't really know until you really stepped foot down there at the World Trade Center. But one of the greatest things I have to say on that day was that the bad was the bad, but the good was the greatest. And there were so many people that came around to help, that a lot of people don't even realize some of the stories that we were sitting down. I tell people all the time, some of the greatest stories were people from, just regular civilians. I was at home at the time. I was up I lived there near West Point. I had my 2 sons off to school. You met Travis, and I got them off to school, and my other son, and, I come walking in the house and I hear a plane just hit the North Tower. And right away, I stopped and said a prayer because I knew right away that somebody would be killed and a New York City firefighter would probably die fighting that fire somehow. Because when you got to fight a high-rise fire, you got to run up hundreds of flights of stairs. Somebody's going to have a heart attack. I hate to say it. A medical emergency. I stopped and said a prayer, and I went into the shower, and all of a sudden I hear a second plane just hit the South Tower. And at that point, I got sick to my stomach. And I knew right away I had to get down to the city. I had to get to my firehouse. But on the other hand, I also knew I had to take care of my 2 sons. And I had to make sure that they were safe. So I called the school, and it was a total lockdown at the school up in New Windsor. I talked to the principal, and they said, listen, your sons will be safe. I said, I got to go. So I basically got in a car, and I started driving like 100 miles an hour to get down towards my firehouse in the Bronx. But I had a doctor's appointment on the way, and the doctor's appointment was probably about 20 minutes away from where my firehouse was. So I stopped off at the hospital, and I go, what? And there's like 100 people waiting online to go into the hospital. I couldn't understand it. And I go by people, and I'm running in to get into the hospital and go to the nurse. I said, listen, I'm a New York City fireman. I know I have an appointment today, but I have to leave. She goes, Mr. Edwards, the doctor would like to talk to you. So next thing I know, the doctor comes out. Within 2 seconds, he came out, and he goes, Mr. Edwards, please, I have a friend, a brother, or a cousin. Actually, I was going 90 miles an hour in my mind, too. I wanted to get out of there. And I run back outside, and now there's like 300 people online. And I go over to a woman. I said, what are you here for? She goes, we're here to donate blood to the victims of the World Trade Center. Ooh. This is at 10:30, 11 o'clock. People stopped their cars, ran into hospitals and said, take my blood. And this is 20 minutes or half an hour away from the city. I get on back on the New York State Thruway, and I'm driving down. All of a sudden, I see an unmarked state trooper car. Because at the time, all bridges and tunnels were locked out. Nobody was allowed in. Nobody's allowed out. I show him my ID, and him and I drive over to Tappan Zee Bridge and follow on him. And I get on the top of the bridge, on the Tappan Zee Bridge, and as far as the eye could see, you could always see the World Trade Center on a clear day. That was one of the most beautiful days he ever won. It wasn't a cloud in the sky. I don't think I've ever seen another day quite like September 11, 2001. And I look down, I see the billow of smoke coming out, and right away I know that we've lost so many innocent civilians. I know I've lost friends, and I start crying my eyes out. I get down to my firehouse, which is in the Bronx. All the toll collectors let us go. Toll collectors were in the booth crying themselves. Get down to my firehouse, and now we have companies from throughout the tri-state area. They all ran down to different firehouses to help out. We call basically mutual aid. So we had companies from Westchester. We had companies from Rockland, Orange. We had companies from Long Island, New Jersey. They all came to help. A lot of people don't understand that just because a terrorist attack happens in New York City or any city, that there's not going to be a fire or an emergency, a medical emergency. Something's going to happen no matter what. So all these houses had to be manned. So I get into the house, and now you got, like I said, some of the biggest, toughest guys I've ever worked with who went over, started crying. We're trying to figure out. And we're trying to think of guys that we work with that might be down in Manhattan working that day. And I made 3 or 4 phone calls, and I didn't get calls from 2 guys. 2 of the brothers never called me back. One of them was Dave Weiss, and the other one was Paul Tegmeyer. And as a matter of fact, I'm wearing Paul Tegmeyer's shirt right now. At that point, we didn't even know. I left a message with Dave, left a message with Paul, left a message with Anthony, and I just said, listen, I want to make sure you're all right. Give me a chance, call me back. And like I said, I only got a call back from Anthony. I never got a call back from Paul or Dave. They were both killed on 9/11. So now at this time, computer readout comes out over the computer of over 600 firefighters that are missing. Guys came in from home, and guys who were getting off of work jumped on rigs and ran down. They didn't even have a roster of who was, they had like a basic roster, but they had no idea on how many guys came down. They had to basically rebuild from the bottom and get an idea on who was working. So they asked for rosters throughout the city. Every firehouse had to send a roster around on who was working that day and who was getting off. And that's how they based it on. And if your name was on that roster, then you were considered one of the missing. If you weren't accounted for, you were one of the MIA. So at this point, 600 names come over the computer for all the guys that are missing. And now, not just 2, not just Dave and Paul and Anthony. Now we see Johnny LaFamina. I see all these guys' names. Vinny Howard, guys that are brothers. were brothers. We broke bread together in the firehouse. He had my back. I had his back. We relied on one another. If any of our kids were married or birthdays or baptisms, we're all invited. It's a family. You look at that list and your heart sunk right away. You know, like I said, grown men don't cry. I never stopped. Even 23 years later, I'm still crying. And what eventually ended up happening was at about 6:30 at night, they said all New York City firefighters who were working tomorrow, go home and come back. To me, it's kind of crazy. I was basically on medical leave, had 2 metal plates and 8 screws in my left knee. I had nobody to answer to. I wasn't on light duty, so I wasn't going home. I think a couple of guys did go home. They were coming in the morning because you had to man the house. You had to have every firehouse had to be manned throughout the city. And at about 8 o'clock at night, all of a sudden, 2 Rikers Island prison vans pull up. Rikers Island is one of the most violent criminals throughout the country. And we're all standing out in front of the firehouse looking, going, what can happen next? You know, and all of a sudden, the prisoners get out. They got their jumpsuits on. They got no handcuffs, no ankle bracelets. They get out. The COs get out. No guns, no, nightstick or whatever. And they open up the back of the bus and they start handing out half-baked chickens, mashed potatoes, salad, bread, juice. They come in and they serve over hundreds of firefighters. They serve us dinner. And then they get back in the prison van and they go back to Rikers Island. These are the hardened criminals. And when I stopped and thought about it, I didn't think about it then, but when you try to look for that hope, faith, and never giving up, I all fall back on that woman waiting in line at the hospital, every company around the city, around the tri-state, coming to help us, and some of the hardened criminals from Rikers Island coming to help us in serving food and firehouse throughout the city. Eventually, I ended up getting down to the World Trade Center about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, not from a New York City company. I got it from Engine 13 from Yonkers. It was a chief in it with an aide, a driver. They had an engine, and an Engine 13. It was a chauffeur and an officer in the front. I went over to the chief, and I said, Chief, you need any help that? He goes, yeah, Chris, I'm not familiar with Old Man Ann. I'd love to have you down with me. So I jumped on the back of the rig. Now, I had 2 metal plates and 8 screws in my left knee. I've already been through 5 operations, but it's never given up. I got friends that I got brothers that I'm looking for. What ended up happening was I got down there with them, and the closer we got to the World Trade Center, you could see the beams of light, which they turn on every anniversary of 9/11. They had them on, and that was the only electric that they had, powered by generators. We got up to Church Street. As a matter of fact, to me, it was a blessing that it would be on Church Street. And we got up on Church Street, and there was a chief in the street that I had known. And I kept asking him, Chief, you got something to do? You got something for us to do? And said, I got 3 guys from Yonkers. I got 2 guys from my company. And I was just a fireman. I wasn't an officer, but I knew this chief. At that time, I don't think everything kind of went. And if you knew somebody, you tried to get as much out of them from giving it something to do with. So he eventually ended up saying, Chris, go take the radio and take these guys down to the post office and go into the post office and put water on building number 7, which came down at 5:20 in the evening, had fires in all the windows, because they stored over thousands and thousands of gallons of diesel fuel been stored in there. So that's what we did. We went over there. We relieved 54 engine of the line, and we took over that line, and we hit pockets of fire in building number 7 till like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And then what happened was, as we were hitting pockets of fire throughout the night, all of a sudden you started hearing vibro alarms going off. And a vibro alarm is what a firefighter wears. If you're not moving for more than 15 seconds, that vibro alarm goes off. So every single beep, beep, beep that I heard was either a fireman that dropped his mask and ran for his life, or it was a fireman who was trapped. And that's what I figured, that there might be brothers trapped in the trade center, because you could hear the vibro alarms. And at that point, I handed the radio over to the chief from Yonkers, and I said, listen, we got to get that in and see if we can do a search. If we can get in and try to help out.
We'll join Karolyn and Chris in just a moment with more of Zuzu All Grown Up.
First, an important message.
Start your morning right with premium coffee roasts available at ZuzuNetwork.com, and drink them in your Zuzu All Grown Up coffee mug. Also perfect for tea and hot chocolate.
Stay inspired throughout the day with the same gratitude journal used by Karolyn and Chris, and check out t-shirts, hats, books, Christmas keepsakes, and more at ZuzuNetwork.com/shop.
Join Zuzu's network today at zuzunetwork.com/join.
Karolyn is creating an international network of aspiring angels, everyday people who believe that they can help make the world a better place by making life better for even just one other person.
Let us know you want to earn your wings at zuzunetwork.com/join, and Karolyn and Chris will send you inspirational material to support you in your journey.
We're back with more Zuzu All Grown Up.
I gave him the radio. We walked down. We came around a corner, around a post office, and that's when I seen it. I mean, it was just over 300-400 yards out. It was just flat. 210-story buildings were flat. To my left was the Millennium Hotel. There was a chief in the street. Gene retired 4 months ago, and he's in the street directing guys. And I went over to Gene. I said, hey, Chief, you got to get us out there to see if we can help out. He goes, how are you going to get out there, Chris? You got 2 metal plates and 8 screws in your knee, and you went through 5 operations. I said, you retired 4 months ago, and you're standing in the street telling me I can't go out? And he says, okay, Chris, go take the Stokes. So what we did is one of the other guys I was with from my company, he went back up to the firehouse, and me and this young guy, Richie Chismonte, went all the way out to the edge. It was 300-400 yards of double people on each line, like a snake going all the way out to the end. They had already pulled out one Port Authority cop out alive earlier, and they were working out getting a second Port Authority cop. And we went to the edge of the hole with the Stokes, which is a basket. You would take somebody, rescue basket. And we brought it out to the end of the hole. At about 11 o'clock, they freed up the body of Port Authority police officer John McLaughlin. And John's body came out, and he was fully intact. The rumor at the time was that John and another police officer rode down a piece of concrete from the 84th floor. That was the rumor. And I'm saying to myself, if they made it, we'll find more people alive. That's what I was praying for. That wasn't the case. John was on the first floor in the North Tower when the towers came down. Well, actually, the South Tower. That's when he got trapped. So we got his body out, and when he was laying there in the basket, I looked right at him, and he's saying, I just want to go see my wife and kids. I want to see my wife and kids. And I said, you're going home, brother. He didn't know who I was. I said, you're going home. You're going home. We handed him out. He went that long 300-400 yard snake all the way out, double people on each side. And they put him in an ambulance, and they took John away. And that was next to the Millennium Hotel. From a shot of help, a shot of hope, that 4-letter word that I carried with me for a long time, HOPE. When he came out, I had so much hope that we would find more people alive. As soon as he came out, all of a sudden, you had such an empty feeling like, what do I do next? Where do I go? You didn't know where to go. And you had 16 acres. You had 16 acres, and you're figuring that there's hundreds of thousands of people that were killed. I started walking back up towards Duane Street. There's a company over there. And on the way up, I run into a New York City police officer. He was an officer. He had a white shirt on. Comes over to me. He says, you just came out, ground zero. I said, yeah. He says, how was it? And I shook my head. I said, we got hope. We just took out one Port Authority cop out alive. He goes, oh, wow. He says, I'm so glad, at least we got a chance maybe of finding other people. And I said, yeah, brother. I said, you know what? We'll keep them in your prayers. And he turns around to me and he says, well, listen, I got to tell you something. I have something to give you. I said, what? He takes out this white T-shirt out of his pocket. And he says, listen, my son made this shirt. They made it in school on Tuesday after the attack. And my son is 9 years old, and he wants me to give it to a New York City firefighter who's a hero. And I looked at him and I said, I can't take that shirt. And he says, please, I had promised my son I would give it to a New York City firefighter who's a hero. And I said, all the heroes are back there. And I pointed to where the Trade Center was. I said, I'm not a hero. Those are the heroes. And he says, well, what should I do? What am I going to tell my son? And I said, well, listen, I'll take it, but I'll never wear that T-shirt. And there's a kid out there now who's 30 years old. 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And his name is Chris D. from Old Bethpage, Long Island. I got the shirt right in my memorabilia rack over here. And it says, you're doing a wonderful job. You're doing an amazing job. We love you, Chris D. from Old Bethpage, Long Island. And I've kept that. But one day I'll get a chance to meet that young man. I'm going to give him a handshake and a hug, and I'm going to tell him, you don't know what you did for me at that moment. The same moment that I look back and think of all the great people, the hospital, the prisoners, companies from around the city, this police officer's the father, and even John McLaughlin, they're all giving me hope. So many different ways of giving hope that carried me through so many different difficult days after that. At that time, I get up to the firehouse on the corner and I see these two guys with cameras. Now I'm mad because I think there's somebody grabbing a camera, taking pictures of the brothers coming out of the hole, brothers coming in, and they're hugging and crying. It's like an emotional thing. I don't know who these two guys are. Those are the two French brothers that did the documentary on 9/11. The two brothers were inside the North Tower when the towers collapsed.
Oh.
If you ever seen a video when the first plane hits, when Flight 11 hits the North Tower, and you hear them go, oh, there's chiefs on the ground. They're checking a gas leak a couple of blocks away from the Trade Center. And then all of a sudden you see the airline Flight 11 go into the North Tower. And that's where those were the French brothers following a probe around since June. They just so happened to be there. And they caught some of the most important times for families and friends and brothers. And I mean, some of the saddest times of different, people losing their lives. But I mean, I see my friend Dave Weiss, who I called early in the day, the day before to see if he was all right. He's on that video. Those two French brothers, that was the last time I seen Dave. I can't thank them enough when I watch it just to see Dave. And I took a picture of the picture and I save it on my phone because so I always have Dave with me, It was kind of a tough situation because now the captain, my company from 81 Engine was relocated down, it's 24 truck, and they relocated down to Duane Street, I'll say. Their first assignment was 54 Engine, which lost almost 14 firefighters. When they first were relocated, they went from 81 Engine in the Bronx up to 54 and 4, which is in the 50s. And I talked to some of the brothers, and it got so overwhelming because they were getting phone calls from family members of the brothers that were working, and they couldn't give them a straight answer on if they knew that they were okay. A little side story, and I talk about guardian angels. I just spoke to a very good friend of mine, Phil Capadora, not too long, last weekend. I seen him, and Phil was telling me the story. He was the chauffeur that day on 81 Engine, his first tour, and they were relocated in 54 and 4. And Phil was answering the phone at the time, and I'm not going to mention the firefighter's name, but a family member from this firefighter called up and talked to Phil. And Phil says, listen, I'm sorry, but we have no information on if anybody's safe or where they may be. Phil ended up getting one of the guys that were from that company, 54 and 4, and said, here, you might want to talk to this wife and explain to her the situation because we can't do it no more. It's got to become emotional. And what they did is then 81 got relocated to Duane Street. Phil ended up going down into the World Trade Center and doing 30-day details. He goes there in March of 2002. They just took down the South Tower ramp, which was used for bringing trucks in and out. You had no choice. There were bodies that were buried under there for 8 months. And what they did was they took that tower down. They took the ramp down. They built a big, long ramp in the middle of the tub is what we called it. And the foundation of the World Trade Center was called the tub. When they took that South Tower ramp down, they started finding bodies. And Phil was down there digging at the time. And Phil told me what they did is they were picking stuff up. And on the back of one of the turnout coats was the name of the person who called up Phil in 54 and 4 to find out if their husband was alive. Phil was there when the body came out of the person who called Phil up from 54 and 4. And Phil and I were just talking about it, like I said, last week, and it was an emotional thing. He goes, oh, Chris, it was so strange. I go, no, it's not strange. It's not strange. God put you there for a reason. God put you there to answer that phone, and now God directed you to be there to bring closure to that family. I mean, you can't get any closer to God, guardian angels than that. And I explained it to him. Going back to Duane Street, I didn't know Phil at the time. Phil was the chauffeur for 81 Engine. And all of a sudden, the captain sees me. And he goes, Edwards, what are you doing down here? If you got 2 metal plates and 8 screws in my knee, everybody knew I had all these operations and stuff. And he says, you get back up to the Bronx. I couldn't walk because my knee was so sore, Fred, you know. I was trying to figure out a way to get back down to the Trade Center. And I'd have to walk blocks and blocks. I couldn't do it. All of a sudden, the divine intervention, 81 engine gets a run to the South Tower on Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for an odor of smoke. That's impossible. The towers are down. Somebody called up and said there's an odor of smoke down at the South Tower of the World Trade Center was. And 81's got to respond.
We'll join Karolyn and Chris in just a moment with more of Zuzu All Grown Up.
First, an important message.
To find out more about the organization featured in today's episode or a previous episode and to learn more about how you can help, go to zuzunetwork.com/beanangel.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and I dedicate a lot of my time going fast. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently or having trouble with routine tasks. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. Visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Have you heard? Affordable healthcare is better than ever. And right now there are more carriers and plans to choose from. If you're between 18 and 64 years old with a household income of $25,000 or less, this message is for you. Right now, the government's Affordable Care Act is available for individual and family health coverage plans with little to no cost to you. Don't gamble your health. Call Health Care for All. 70% of callers qualify for a zero-cost healthcare coverage. See if you are one of them. Call now. Our agents are standing by to help you get the health insurance plan you and your family needs and deserves. If you're uninsured or struggling to afford your current health insurance, help is just a phone call away. This is not Medicaid or Medicare. This is the marketplace with the largest selection of healthcare plans from the Affordable Care Act. To find a plan that's right for you, call 800-788-2406. That's 800-788-2406.
A careless driver can change your life in an instant. Do you know what to do or who to call? If you've been injured in a motor vehicle accident and don't have an attorney, call Auto Accident Help Desk for a free consultation. We can answer all of your questions and estimate the potential value of your case. Call Auto Accident Help Desk and connect with an expert personal injury attorney.
Call 800-348-7312. 800-348-7312.
Don't worry how to handle your medical bills, lost wages, and pain. We will get you the money you deserve.
They got me way more than the insurance company offered.
The consultation is free, and you don't pay any legal fees unless we win or settle your case. Make the smart call if you've been injured in an auto accident. Call Auto Accident Help Desk for a free legal consultation.
Call 800-348-7312. 800-348-7312. 800-348-7312.
Auto Accident.
Zuzu's book club features recommendations from Zuzu herself on books she loves and thinks you will love also. All of the books that the club reads, fiction and nonfiction, are inspirational and uplifting. Folks, this is a life-enhancing club to be part of. You can sign up for free at zuzunetwork.com/book club. That's zuzunetwork.com/book club.
The current book of the week is Coming Through the Flames, My Life in the FDNY, by our guest, Chris Edwards. In it, he recalls his experience in the fire department of New York, leading up to 9/11, its aftermath, and the spiritual lessons he learned from it that he continues to carry with him until this day.
This is Zuzu, all grown up.
So the captain looks at me and goes, Edwards, don't you get in the back of that rig. I said, okay, Cap. And he gets in, and I jumped in the rig. And I'm sitting on one of the brothers' laps, and he goes, Chris, what are you doing? You're crazy. He told you not to get in. I said, Stevie, I'm not going home. I'm not going home. I got all my friends. I'm looking for my friends down there. So the chauffeur takes the rig, goes all the way down. He goes over towards the West Side Highway. And at that point, I'm figuring that Phil is going to make a left-hand turn, and Phil Capador makes a right-hand turn. The captain sees me. He says, Edwards, I told you to get back up to the Bronx. And I said, Cap, I'm not going home. And I walked in through the south side of the World Trade Center, and I stayed there for 2.5 weeks. Some of the things that I was talking about, hope and fate, I'm in the middle of the pile. You're doing 12 hours. You didn't want to leave. You're doing 12, 36. You don't want to leave. And all of a sudden, I'm in the middle. It's in the middle of the night, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I hear, Chris, hey! And I turn around, and it's Johnny LaFamina, one of the guys on the list who I work with. He was one of the guys that was MIA. And we hugged, kissed one another's cheek, cried, didn't say another word. Johnny went his way, and I went mine. That's how I look at all these guardian angels and putting you in places for reasons. These are some of the most important parts of our lives, you know.
We really appreciate you sharing your story. It really means a lot to us and the listeners, too, about a very difficult part of our history. Something that you have brought up in the past is like taking off your blinders. What are you referring to when you say that?
When you're depressed, I mean, when the fire department retired me, probably one of the worst days of my life. I went through from 2000, I got operated on in September 2000, October 2000, December 2000, March 2001, all major reconstructive surgeries. I'm in a hospital for a month and a half because of infections. I could have retired when I was 42 years old. And, you know, you get into a spot when all of a sudden you go through 9/11 and they find a major heart problem, and they tell me, Chris, you're not going to go back to work anymore. All of a sudden, your purpose in life, what's my purpose? I'm a fireman. I'm there to help people. When you lose that purpose, it's very difficult to try to find it. I kind of felt sorry for myself for a couple of years, and then I started volunteering and going around the country with the New York City Fire Department Disaster Assistant Response Team. And I've been out on 17 disasters since 2005. And what I consider taking my blinders off is I started saying other things. I started saying that, I want to thank people for everything they've done for us. I would also start slowing down in life and start looking at different things in different ways. I mean, one of the greatest things that happened to me after 9/11, it sounds crazy, was an accident. After my father had passed away, it was in an accident, and a car went through the woods, and the car flipped over, and I'm in the car, and the first thing I do is I'm worried about who's in the car with me. And I turned around, I said, "You all right? Are you all right?" I started realizing I was by myself. What ended up happening was just at 2:30 at night, nobody stopped. I go to, it was in between an intersection and like an island that went through the woods about 30 feet. And I get off to one side, nobody would stop at 2:30 in the morning. I get off to the other side, and the first person that stops is this kid. He goes, "Are the people all right?" I goes, "Me." He goes, "You got out of that?" I said, "Yeah, go call an ambulance." I just felt sick to my stomach, that's all. I just went through. I didn't have no seatbelt on. I went through the woods and it flipped. The next thing you know, the first person that stops after that kid is an off-duty EMT from the New York City Fire Department. And he goes to me, "You all right?" I said, "Brother, I'm a New York City fireman." All right. He's checking me out. Another guy stops. He's another EMT. So I had 2 EMTs stop. The next day I went over to the accident. I carry mass cards of every single person that's ever died in my lifetime. Even through 9/11, I got mass cards in my car. I carry with me all the time. There was 2 things missing when we picked everything up out of the car. My father's picture that I carried with me and my uncle's mass card. So my son and I we emptied the car out up into where the tow truck, and we walked the accident site. And next thing you know, we're looking around, and my son goes, "Dad, I can't believe you got out of that car alive." It was my oldest son, Chris. I said, "Chris, the first thing I said when the car stopped, I looked in the back seat and I said, 'Are you all right?' I felt somebody with me. Then I realized it was by myself." And we went back up to the accident site. We're looking around, and there's my uncle's mass card on the ground. And we're looking for my father's picture, and we can't find it. And we're looking, now it's in February, it's freezing. And there's like a pond about 30 feet away from where where the car stopped. And we're going out, and all of a sudden we're going out of I said, "Chrissy, forget it. We're not going to find it." And we're walking out, and he goes, "Dad, look out there in the pond. There's something out near that grass." There's grass coming through the ice. So I said, "All right, stay here." I walk out, and there's my father's picture on the ice. And that's my guardian angel. And that's where I started taking my blinders off. And I started seeing so many different things that happened around my life that I was grateful for, that I didn't even realize how grateful and blessed I am to have so many great guardian angels around, And, I would drive in a car and I would see flowers. I'd stop and take pictures of flowers and sunsets. I also call it chasing sunsets. You can never stop being amazed on God's canvas.
You have a book, Coming Through Flames. Can you let people know where they can get that book?
Coming Through the Flames, My Life in the FDNY. As part of taking the blinders off was going through life, and I had a lot of answers. It's on Amazon. If you look up Coming Through the Flames, My Life in the FDNY, the Amazon wanted me to ask $25 for the book. I asked $17.76. And 2 reasons is because of our independence, and the other reason is because the Freedom Tower stands at 1776 next to the memorial of where the World Trade Center is. I felt really funny about taking money for the book. So what I do is I've done fundraisers for firefighters and even friends. And unfortunately, some of them have passed away, and had one firefighter's wife who has Lou Gehrig's disease, and she's been doing phenomenal for over 20 years. April Scott, I did a book signing for her so she can get alternative medication, and she's doing great. So everything is about giving back. Like I said, I feel funny about taking money for the book because I wrote it for my children. I want them to have something that they can go and grab and read and say, this is what your grandfather was about when I'm gone. This is what your great-grandfather did. And you could read his own story in his own words. And in that book, it's all about hope, faith, never giving up. And I've also added never giving in. You never give in to anything, and you always keep fighting. We should never give up. And now what I do is if I go into a restaurant and I see a veteran, whether he's actually Korean War, I even seen a World War II veteran one time with his wife. And what I do is I go in and I'll buy them dinner, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I just ran into 3 Marines about a month ago that never met a New York City fireman. One was from Minnesota, one was from Texas, and the other one was from Virginia. And great, great guys, Mike Fisher, Price, and it was this other firefighter from Fort Worth. And I see them sitting in a restaurant. And what I did is I went over and I bought them, they were having drinks because they were actually at a wedding party. And I bought them drinks and I went over and talked to them. And they go, you know what? We joined the military after 9/11. And we've never met a New York City firefighter till we met you. These are the heroes. And this is why these are some of the great, great people we should never, ever forget for their sacrifices that they made. Many, 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 many years, men and women alike. And the ultimate sacrifices and the families have all them gratitude for everything they've done for us.
So, Chris, we want to thank you so much for being with us. I mean, we could go on for hours here. And you are a hero to us.
Yes, you are. Thank you for joining us. We will see you soon, I hope.
A very moving interview with today's guest, Chris Edwards. Karolyn and Dr. Chris, thank you, and thank you out there in wonderful land for joining us for today's very special episode. We'll be right back with a closing thought.
Do you know someone who is earning their wings? Someone practicing kindness and service to others? Perhaps an organization or initiative helping make the world we live in a kinder, sweeter place.
Or maybe you've witnessed the miraculous, the divine, the magnificent in some way in your life, and you'd like to share it with others. Go to zuzunetwork.com/tellmystory and let us know more.
You may end up being featured on an upcoming episode of Zuzu All Grown Up. That's zuzunetwork.com/tellmystory. Now here's Seth Kennedy with today's parting thoughts.
9/11 forever changed America and the world. The events that happened on that day are still an everyday reality for the survivors and first responders. Let us listen to their stories and remember their loved ones, for they are now all of America's loved ones, forever enshrined in our national heart and soul. Let us never forget the 4-letter word that Chris Edwards taught us, HOPE, hope, something that we should never lose, even in the darkest of times. And also remember that another way to dispel darkness is, as today's guest said, to take our blinders off and be ready to see the miracles awaiting us in everyday life. This has been Zuzu All Grown Up, wishing you a life filled with miracles and a light in the darkness that never goes out.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Zuzu All Grown Up.
We hope you've been inspired to live your most wonderful life now and to help those around you do the same.
Remember, no matter what you're going through, no matter who you are, there are people who care about you and your life makes a difference.
It is a wonderful life
Check out ZuzuNetwork.com for more on today's and other episodes, including transcripts and merchandise you won't want to be without.
New episodes are coming soon.
For transcripts of today's broadcast, go to ZuzuNetwork.com/transcripts.
Watch a video clip of today's episode at www.instagram.com/Zuzu, all grown up. Then click on the Reels tab from the top of the center of the page. Catch up on past episodes and discover currently premiering and upcoming episodes as well, and get helpful links and exclusive clips from our recordings. That's www.instagram.com/Zuzu, all grown up.
Zuzu All Grown Up with your hosts Karolyn Grimes and Dr. Chris Brunell.
Announcer and guide Seth Kennedy.
Executive producer Kevin R. Stillmock.
Coordinating producer Holly Ann Way.
Technical producer Stella Joelle.
Managing producer Karina Filatova. A Wonderful Land production.
In collaboration with Radio Wonderful.